President Obama's cabinet for his second term coming into sharper focus now with the recent naming of 4 crucial positions. That's the easy part, and now the nominees have to go through confirmation hearings, and given the controversy brewing on Capitol Hill, there could be some rough sailing for a couple of them. Get ready for their turn in the hot seat. Jack Lew in line to be the next Treasury Secretary. Chuck Hagel tapped to run the Pentagon. John Brennan as director of the CIA. John Kerry for Secretary of State. Will they all be confirmed? Let's bring in our political insiders. John Lebutillier, former Republican congressman for New York. Pat Caddell, Fox News contributor and a former pollster for President Jimmy Carter. Doug Schoen, he too a Fox News contributor and a former pollster for Bill Clinton. Kerry seems to have a lock.
I think that's right.
He's a member of the boys club up there on Capitol Hill. But what about the others, Doug?
Well, I think there are going to be issues and challenges with all 3. If I had to bet, I'd bet that they all are confirmed and that Hagel will be the toughest, but I think ultimately he'll get through. But there's a larger issue here. With Brennan going to CIA and with Jack Lew going to Treasury, this is the effective consolidation of the White House and the president directly over Treasury and CIA nominally an independent agency.
Are you saying these are his cronies?
I'm saying these are his cronies, and that this is a consolidation of power that in some sense is worrisome.
Yeah. Pat, what do you think about this? Especially Hagel, who has said to Republicans at least, some very troubling things about Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah.
Said so many troubling things to Democrats, not just Republicans, and I think he could, as Doug said, could have the most problems. What we see here is the President Obama and his chief of staff will either be Ron Klain, who is apparently what they're being discussed, who's Biden's, or will be Tom Donilon's deputy at the NSC. Look, this is all reaching inside to people, and all, by the way, white males for the diversity, all who are willing to help Obama drop the mask of any pretense of bipartisanship. I'm divided the country. I'm going to push my agenda through. And the discussion that each of them is now having is about what we can do in terms of ignoring the law. But Hagel has got real problems, in my opinion.
You know, John, you have pointed out that Republicans are in disarray. Does that make it impossible for them to really, in earnest, oppose these nominees?
Well, it makes it harder. You know, I think the big thing here, what Pat and Doug just said, was the president is consolidating his power and exerting his influence on all the departments.
Entitled to do that, isn't he?
He's entitled to do it, but there's no opposition to it. There's no other side. Well, because the Republicans are crumbling of their own weight. We have this poll, which we're going to put up, that the heart of the Republican coalition, this Tea Party movement, is down to only 8% of American people.
From 24 back in April 2010.
So that is sort of self-inflicted political suicide on their own. They've shrunk themselves down. And the Republican narrative against Obama is non-existent. And that's the vacuum that the president can operate in.
You know, part of what you want in a Secretary of Defense, it strikes me, Doug, is judgment.
Right.
Hagel said of the surge in Iraq that it's the most dangerous foreign policy blunder in this country since Vietnam. Of course, the surge worked.
Yes, it did.
So doesn't it call into question, on a critical issue, Hagel's judgment?
Well, it does on that issue, Greg. I'd go one step further. Since he has been willing to engage with Hamas and Hezbollah, since he has opposed not only the surge in Iraq, but also in Afghanistan, he really is for a four-scare retreat of American interests around the world. He is, as a Republican, doing the bidding of the Democratic left. And in that sense, it is a change in philosophy, I think, from what has been the prevailing consensus in American foreign policy.
He is being, Pat, ridiculed as an appeaser and a pacifist, and
well,
you know, which may be unfair.
It's probably unfair. Look, let's all acknowledge what a hero he was in Vietnam. And this, however, I get tired of the excuse because he served honorably in Vietnam, and I can name you many people who did not, who've been in government, but you know, that's somehow a pass. We're talking about his policy ideas. He is a walking Vietnam syndrome, which is the notion, and by the way, it speaks to, I believe, President Obama's actual policy. He wants to withdraw from the world and also not supporting Israel. And most importantly, and by the way, the biggest issue of all, the one that I have polls on out of the ears, where 80% of the American people are concerned about Iran. And on Iran, if they know his views, I think they're toxic for the American people.
John, on more than one occasion, Chuck Hagel has said things that are regarded as anti-Israel, which invites the question, is he too soft on Iran and too hard on Israel?
Well, first of all, here's what I predict will happen. When we get close to the hearings, he will go and do these courtesy calls up on the Senate. Right. Goes to office to see each senator that's on.
And he'll say, I didn't really mean it.
Well, he'll talk. These guys are very good at schmoozing and letting the senator who's going to decide soften things up. And he's going to walk back some of these comments. Right. And when it's over, there's going to be less white-hot opposition to him.
Can we talk about Lou, too,
sure,
by the way?
Jack Lew. I mean, did you hear Jeff Sessions today lit into Lou, saying that his testimony was essentially a lie on Capitol Hill before Sessions Committee? He called it fantastical.
Yeah, I think, though, that Lou will be confirmed. I think that while there's opposition to him on policy, there isn't the kind of opposition John and Pat were speaking to that Hagel's facing. I know Lou. He's a good guy. The problem is he's effectively fronting for policies that are not dealing with the debt and the deficit.
But let me start. He's another Goldman Sachs guy who made a lot of money while the country was being raped.
Nothing wrong with making money.
No. We paid for it.
Citigroup, Pat.
Citigroup. I'm sorry. Yeah. Where we were giving him the money, he was taking. I'm sorry. Let me get my big banks confused.
Right.
But let me tell you about Lou. The real problem with Lou is he represents the president's worst instincts. He's the one that scuttled the deal in 2011 by the last-minute introduction of more taxes. Sure. He is a person who says, no, this is Obama on steroids to the left. He is pushing the country in a place that he doesn't have a mandate for, except for what you said. He has no opposition to stop it.
Let me just say one thing. The shame of these picks is they're small. You know, they're inside the Beltway. They're small. Really they're political hacks. Where the president, yeah, the president wanted to be a transformational president.
Right.
Now, he's been reelected. Not many presidents in the history or two-term presidents. He can be a successful president if he does something great. And the great thing he could do for a liberal Democrat is save the social safety net from financial collapse. He had the chance to do it. He still has the chance to do it. He's not doing it.
Secretary of the Treasury.
Secretary Bowles would have done it. Or other people who would have brought some imagination and some administration. Well, you're right. It's small bore, and it's the opposite of Reagan.
Bowles' recommendations on the debt and deficit. He's not going to pick him as his Treasury Secretary. Vice President Joe Biden saying that President Obama might take matters into his own hands on gun control, possibly issuing yet another executive order that would not require congressional approval. This as a brand new Rasmussen poll asks Americans who should authorize gun ownership laws. Take a look at this. 44% say the federal government, 29% say state governments, 12% think the authority belongs to local governments, 16% are not sure. Way to hang in there. And so where's this debate going, especially if the president acts on his own, which he is wont to do? Let's bring back John Lebutillier, Pat Caddell, Doug Schoen. So my guess is he'll issue another executive order. Who needs Congress?
Well, that's the thing. Congress, as I think we're going to discuss, is not that popular, but we do have enshrined in our ethos and in our Constitution the separation of powers. And while I am a fervent and strong supporter of gun control, I'm nervous about an effort to bypass the Congress.
Look, I'm not sure anybody in the White House has ever read the Constitution, but go ahead, Pat.
Nor they care about it. The fact is, look, we had a discussion this week about the $1 trillion platinum coin. Now let's make a magic coin and make the deficit go away.
I know.
And we had serious people. The White House was seriously considering.
No, they were, but now the Treasury says we're not going to do that.
The Treasury says, but they were considering it. This is madness. What we have going on here, and I saw today, Paul Krugman and others saying the president should just ignore the law because it's bad. Same thing on gun control. We are not a dictatorship. Some of these actions border on being like a banana republic or worse. And we have people saying the law doesn't matter. And I think on gun control, they miss the boat. Without a big solution that involves schools, that involves mental health, violence, as well as guns,
John,
they're dead.
Is the Republican Party on the hot seat here? I mean, there's a lot of pressure at the White House, Capitol Hill, and in the media.
Well, I think they are, but and it's on assault weapons. That's really the point of contention.
Is it unreasonable to once again do a 10-year ban on assault weapons?
It's perfecally reasonable.
It's very reasonable.
We should do it, but we should get a national consensus for doing that.
Right.
Background checks and getting rid of the high-capacity magazines.
We've seen in polls that the wisdom of the people is way ahead of these politicians. They know that mental health, the nutty kids sitting in front of a computer, watching violent
video games. And by the way, the 4 studies on that 10-year ban on assault weapons ended up concluding it had no impact.
Right. And by the way, my daughter, with the 3 children under the age of 7, 7 and under, she's worried about security in the schools, too.
It's got to be
mental
health.
She doesn't understand why we're not
address.
Talking about
All right,
that.
I want to flip to what may happen in 2016. Sure. Okay, it's way early and we'll be criticized for this, but come out with the public policy polling. Hillary Clinton well in the lead among Democrats, and the only Republican that is even close is Chris Christie. Look at Jeb Bush. He's substantially behind at 37%. Marco Rubio also 37%. Weigh in on this.
Greg, here's what we're seeing. Chris Christie, by dint of his bipartisanship during Hurricane Sandy, speaking his mind but reaching across the aisle, has got a constituency in the Republican Party, and I dare say in the nation, that is unique. That's what Pat was speaking to when he's talking about the wisdom of the American people.
But you know what? His problem, critics say, is he's too glib.
He is a little bit too glib, but let me just say, I thought his speech, as we mentioned, was overly attacked. He speaks to this other yearning that's in the country and the disconnect. And you know what? He's the only one who's not out of Washington, and these people are looking at. People hate Washington.
I would caution everybody about, first of all, it's a long way away, 3 years.
But it's interesting how many undecideds there are.
Yeah, but with Chris Christie, his act may wear thin over a long period of time.
Right. I think it already has.
Well, and I think Republican primary voters have long memories. They're elephants, right? And they remember that in many people's minds, that convention speech was pro-Christie, not pro-Romney.
Right.
And at the crunch time in the campaign, he helped himself a little bit more than he helped Romney. I think there's doubt about Christie.
He helped Obama.
Helped Obama.
All right. I want to take a look at 2 other polls, one of which is a lot of fun. Let's first begin with the not so fun, because it's Gallup. 77% of Americans, look at this, think that Washington is really causing the country's problem, serious harm, 19%. Now juxtapose the PPP poll, where it finds that Congress is less popular than Nickelback, which is a Canadian post-grunge rock group, head lice, root canals, but if you include the margin of errors, Congress is actually tied with cockroaches.
Well, here's what I would say. We I think, have a sense when we've seen in the last few weeks that Congress does far more harm than good on a lot of issues. And Greg, I mean, you know, you have a colonoscopy. It's not pleasant, but it provides some sort of salutary result. And I'm hard-pressed, other than higher taxes, to see what we're getting out of Washington these days.
Root canals, the same thing.
Same thing, you're right.
But this tells you, both say the same thing. The alienation against the political class in Washington, Congress at the forefront, it's unprecedented now, and yet we don't really speak to it in American politics. And by the way, you know, where's Congress? Where they should be, at home.
I shifted in my chair when you said colonoscopy. But look, John, final word on this thing. What does this really say about our political system?
Well, what it says is obviously people are disgusted with both parties, the whole thing. They can't stand the bickering. They're looking for someone to come along who's above it and better than it. And a little bit of what Pat said, Chris Christie's
and it's a broken
system,
to. Greg. They want people to come together to solve problems, end the political fighting, and the consolidation
but most
of power.
Of all, they want it on their side rather than on the side of the political class, which is what's wrong with things like no labels and so forth. It's a bunch of insiders pretending to be bipartisan.
Doug Schoen, Pat Caddell, John Lebutillier, our political insiders. Thanks so much. You can get more of our insiders every Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, live.foxnews.com. And they will be back here next Sunday. You can also follow them on Twitter at FN Insiders.